what I want to tell you is that there was something that changed the trajectory of Joseph's life before that moment. And there was something going on in those moments of slavery and in prison. And it's something that for us could change the trajectory of our lives. In talking about trajectory, I always think of Apollo 13. How many of you have seen the movie with Tom Hanks, Apollo 13? Some of you have, some of you haven't. It's with the story of, it was in 1970, it was like the third mission to the moon. And with that mission, there was an accident. Oxygen tanks exploded right before they got to the moon. And so they had to quickly change plans and instead all get into one part of the capsule that was eventually going to return to Earth. And because that's where they could conserve oxygen, what they had left, and they had to conserve power, and so they had to slingshot around the moon and use that slingshotting force to send them back without using any power, because they were saving power to get back. So all these things that happen, NASA calls it their most successful failure, and because of they got the men back to Earth without dying. And so, but there was this moment on the way back, after they got slung back, that they realized, and it was Jim Lovell, who Tom Hanks plays. Jim Lovell was kind of the engineer, math brain on the three astronauts. And as they were going back, he was calculating their re-entry into Earth and realized that their re-entry was going to be too shallow. And so what was going to happen is they were going to bounce off the Earth's atmosphere instead of going through it. And so, and if they were going to bounce off the atmosphere, that meant bounce off into space and never return to Earth and die. And so there was a moment where he was trying to calculate the changes, and it was this, big moment where, they have to push a button, and it's like, how do they do that in Hollywood? They make just pushing a button the most dramatic thing, but this really was, got to push buttons to make rockets fire just the right time. And I heard an interview with Jim Lovell, and he was explaining this part, and he was saying that actually it was a 2-degree difference. 2 degrees adjustment. Now that doesn't sound like much, a 2-degree adjustment, but what he explained was 2 degrees, like right here, it's just a fraction. It doesn't make a difference. But 2 degrees, if this is the straight course, and 2 degrees, I make adjustment here, over time and distance, when I get to that wall, 2 degrees, I'll be way over there instead of right here. And so over time and distance, 2 degrees makes a huge difference. And what I want to talk about today is something that seems small, that you might it's a 2-degree difference, that you may just want to kind of blow off. But what I want to say, that in the story of Joseph, that is the something that changes the trajectory of his life, that's just a 2 degrees difference, is forgiveness. And forgiveness is the 2 degrees trajectory difference that can change the trajectory of your life from going from death to life. It's that kind of forgiveness. And it's not just the forgiveness we receive, but it's also the forgiveness that we give. And so that's what I want to talk about in this story of Joseph. And I don't want to blow past what he had to forgive. So I do want to retell a little bit of the story. And for some of us, maybe it's been a while since we've read that, to catch up on some of the details of what happened to Joseph, to know exactly what he had to forgive, because it wasn't small. It wasn't small. So the bulk of Joseph's story is in Genesis 37 to 45, and the rest of the remaining chapters of Genesis 50 are kind of the wrapping up of the story, and Joseph's family coming to Egypt and joining him, and his dad, Jacob, blessing all the sons and that sort of thing. But it starts in Genesis 37, and Genesis 37 is a big chapter. There's a lot that happens. We first get introduced to Joseph as a grown young man, and we hear that Joseph is favored by his daddy, Jacob. And you would think that Jacob, with his story with his mom, Jacob and Esau, you know, his dad favored Esau, his mom favored Jacob. You would think that a dad would learn some lessons from that about showing favoritism to one of his kids. But Jacob doesn't. And he shows his favoritism to Joseph in a big way. And he makes this multicolored dream coat. This multicolored coat, and he gives it to Joseph, and he's to wear it all the time, and it distinguishes him from the rest of his brothers. Now Joseph, he is the youngest, next to youngest of his family. He's the 11th son born, one of two sons born to Rachel, the wife that Jacob loved more than Leah. Again, another dysfunctional kind of part of the story. Can't get into that. But anyway, so the first four sons, the oldest sons, are Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. And they're all born to Leah, the woman who's not loved by her husband. And so I don't know what's going on with these sons, you know, as they see Joseph with the special favoritism and this multicolor dream coat that he's wearing. But the other thing that we learn about Joseph is that he has dreams. And these dreams have meaning. And he has the ability to interpret them. Although when he first shares these dreams, it's pretty obvious to his brothers and his parents what the meaning of the dreams. Nobody has to interpret them. He shares the dreams, and first dream, some sheaves in the field. There's 12 of them, and 11 bow down to Joseph. And the brothers are like, we know what that means. And then next one is stars and the moon. And they all bow down to the one star. And then it's like mom and dad are like, hey, we're the sun and moon. What? We're going to bow down to you too? And but dad keeps it in the back of his mind. So he's favored. And then there's this moment where Joseph is sent out to check up on his brothers. The brothers are out tending the flocks, and Joseph goes out, and the brothers decide, hey, let's get rid of this dreamer. And they plot, they scheme. And some of them are saying, let's kill him. Let's get rid of him. We'll just take off his coat, bloody it up with some animal's blood, show it to dad, say he was killed by a wild animal. Well, this Reuben, Simeon, the oldest, says, hey, let's not put his blood on our hands, and says, stop, let's just throw him in this well over here. And so they catch him, they beat him up, throw him down in a well, and Reuben must have went off somewhere, because he comes back later and finds out that some of the others said, hey, let's kill him. And then Judah steps in and says, no, let's not kill him. Oh, look, there's some slave traders over here. Let's sell him and we'll get rid of him that way. And so two brothers step in to kind of save his life from being killed, but still not enough to rescue Joseph. And it seems that Reuben was coming back thinking to rescue his brother out of the well. And he goes, where is he? He said, oh, we sold him to some traders. And so that's how chapter 37 ends. There's a little interlude. We skip over to chapter 39. And the Lord says that he was with Joseph as he was sold into the house of Potiphar, who was the captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of all of Egypt. And so he's sold into this house that's a house of privilege, and he's a slave there. And it says in the scriptures that the Lord caused Joseph to prosper. That's an interesting word for us as Americans, because when we think prosper, I mean, we think wealth. We think doing well. We think high on the hog. We think, we got money to spend. We're having good times. Nothing's going wrong. That's prosperity. But here, it's for a slave named Joseph. And God, the scriptures say that he prospered as a slave. So there's something about that maybe is a little different. And it's probably something like this, just that what he did, everything he touched went well. his work that he did. It was so excellent that it just blessed the whole household. When he went out shopping for the household, he got all the deals and saved money. When he was tending the garden plot for food in the household, it produced more with his garden. So the Lord blessed whatever Joseph did, and so Potiphar puts him in charge of the whole household. And then, of course, Potiphar's wife has eyes for Joseph. I guess he's also blessed physically. He kind of looks good. And so she says, hey, come to bed with me. He's like, how could I do that to God? How could I do that to my master? And finally it comes to a point where he has to run from her. He actually flees. She grabs his jacket and then shows it as evidence. I guess she's in a place where she's embarrassed. You know, this Hebrew slave didn't do what she wanted him to do, and so now she's going to clear herself and get back at him, and so she lies. And so she lies, and then husband comes home, here's the lie, here's the story, and then Joseph is thrown into prison. And it's not just any prison, it's a special prison. It's the king's prison. So again, not just an ordinary household he's sold into slavery to, and not just an ordinary prison that he's thrown into, but the king's prison. So up to this point, what has happened to Joseph? He's been betrayed by his brothers, and then when he's sold into slavery, he's working faithfully, serving, doing his best, and someone lies about him. So his employer's wife betrays by lying, and then Joseph ends up in prison. And it's there in prison that while he's, again, just doing his thing, he's serving, he's tending, and again, everything he does, it says the Lord made him prosper in prison. Again, strange to us. We go, prosper as a slave, prosper as a prisoner. So again, different definition of prosper. But he prospers, and so the warden sees that everything that Joseph does turns to gold. So he's like, man, okay, you're in charge of this. Whoa, that's going good. Okay, now you're in charge of this. Whoa, that's good. I'm just going to put you in charge of the whole prison. So here Joseph is again, just doing his thing. He's put in charge of the whole prison. And then, of course, two of the king or the Pharaoh's prisoners are the baker and the cupbearer. And the cupbearer guy brings the wine to the Pharaoh and maybe taste it before he gives it to him or whatever, make sure it's not poison. I don't know. But anyway, they both end up in prison, and they both have dreams. And at this moment, the dream thing comes back into the picture. This gift, this ability that Joseph used is now called to attention again. These two men have dreams. And it's interesting, Joseph, it says that he noticed that they were downcast. He noticed that they think about, your life and the busyness that you are in, and going to work, school, getting kids there, maybe the classes you go to at school and how many classes you go to and the people that you see are, think about, could you recognize someone's countenance and notice whether they were in a good mood or a bad mood? Maybe sometimes. But maybe most of the time you might be too busy. You're doing your thing to even stop and say, hey, what's going on? I see you're not looking so great. What's happening? Joseph did this with these two guys, and they say, well, we had dreams. Nobody here to interpret them. We know they mean something. And Joseph's like, dreams come from God. I'll tell you. And so obviously, he's been talking with these people. They know he's connected to God in some way when he makes this statement. So he tells the dreams what they mean. And of course, with the wine cupbearer, he tells first and says, hey, you're going to, in 3 days, the 3 branches are 3 days, and you're going to end back up in Pharaoh's court serving wine. And so the baker's like, hey, that sounds pretty good. Tell me mine. And he says, well, 3 days, you're going to get your head lopped off, and you're going to be dead. And so the baker's like, eh. Anyway, so Joseph says to the wine cupbearer, says, hey, remember me. I didn't deserve anything to be thrown into this dungeon. And so remember me, show me kindness when you get back into Pharaoh's court. And the guy forgets. 2 years he forgets. 2 more years of being in prison, Joseph just doing his thing. So I just want to pause here in the story and point out a couple of things. Joseph betrayed by his brothers, betrayed by his employer's wife, gets thrown into prison, and then he is forgotten. Forgotten. You know, you think about the moment when you're betrayed, and betrayal, it's one of those things that's hard to forgive because it hurts so much. And why does betrayal hurt more than other things may be done to us? It's kind of interesting. I think it hurts so much because it violates our trust. There's something, when we get hurt in that way, when our trust is violated, then all of a sudden there's this damage where it's like, well, can I trust the next person that I run into? Or can I trust this person? And so, you know, if it's somebody like, shopkeeper, cheats you on some change, or they pass off a counterfeit bill because they don't want to lose the money, they want you to lose the money. So they pass off a counterfeit bill. You realize that, you feel betrayed by that shopkeeper, but it's not a huge deal. I mean, you just go in and you say, hey, this is what happened, and I went to the bank, and so you're the one who passed it off on me. I want $20 or whatever. It's not a big deal, but you might not go to that shopkeeper ever again because it's like, I don't trust them. So it's not a huge deal because they're not real close to you. But move a little closer to someone in relationship, say a friend. And a friend says, hey, let's take a vacation together. And so you buy tickets and you reserve a hotel room and stuff like that. And then 3 weeks before, when you can't cancel your flight and you can't change your reservations, they call you up and say, or they send you a text message saying, hey, sorry, can't go. I'm going on a different vacation with somebody else. You go, ouch. What? How come they didn't let me in and say what they were thinking or what they were planning? And that's where the hurt starts happening. It's actually not so much what they actually did, but it's the thought that they planned something and they thought about it and then they didn't bring you in on it and then they drop it on you. And there's this bam. Like you think about Joseph and then his brothers. I mean, you're talking siblings. And so you're getting really close to the heart. And so it hurts even more because it's like, this is family. This isn't the way family is supposed to treat each other. And then you start, and I'm sure Joseph was thinking, there were some moments he was like, well, when did they start really hating me? I mean, to do something like this, you'd have to hate them. When did they start hating me and why? And then, you think, when did they start plotting to do something to me, to get rid of me? And there's all these things where you go, wow, there was stuff going on. I didn't know it. So you feel duped. You feel tricked. I mean, you all the way to a husband and wife relationship. And husband comes to wife and says, hey, I want to get a divorce. There's somebody else. And then it's just cut to the heart, rip you in half. And then again, the same questions. It's not so much what happens right in that moment, what's being said, but it's like, how come I didn't see this before? How come I didn't see the things that led up to this? And you feel stupid, you feel tricked, you feel betrayed. And so that's what's part of this, what's happened to Joseph and what he's got to forgive. And then of course, when he is accused falsely and he's lied against, there's no one to stand up for him. He's gone. Where's his family? He's been sold into slavery. He's been separated from his family, separated from friends who could stand up and say, no, that's not his character. That wouldn't happen. So, and then he's thrown into prison, and then he's forgotten. Think about the things that maybe Joseph had to overcome where he didn't become embittered. I mean, think about some of the things that he may have begun thinking about his life. Maybe things like, man, well, I'm never going to use my gifts again because every time I use my gifts, it just leads to trouble and conflict. So I'm just going to be less. I'm not going to do what God has gifted me to do. I'm just going to avoid that because it just leads to conflict and trouble. Or maybe, he thinks, well, man, look at me. I'm here in prison. Man, I served faithfully my father. Where'd that get me? Sold into slavery. I served as a slave faithfully. Look where that got me. I'm serving in prison faithfully, and now I'm forgotten. You know what? Serving other people sucks. I'm just going to serve myself right now because it doesn't get you anywhere. You know, these are the things that Joseph probably battled and had to fight. And somewhere along the line, he dealt with that with God. Somewhere along the line, he made a 2-degree trajectory change. And he was able to let go of some of that stuff and be able to forgive and not become embittered towards God. You know, there were probably some lies that came in there, some thoughts where, you know, thoughts like, I'm forgotten. Was that true? Not with God. It wasn't God hadn't forgotten him. He maybe could have believed things like, I've been left behind, when he's sitting in prison and the guy forgets him. But was he left behind by God? No, that wasn't true. So I'm sure there were some moments where he had to think about those lies that maybe were tempting him to become embittered and go, what's really the truth? What am I going to believe about these things? I think when we do that ourselves, there's this way where we reframe maybe our past. We reframe when we go, where was God during this time? Where was God in this really hard moment of my life? I know sometimes we might be scared to ask that, but I think it's probably a good thing to ask. Because the truth is that God is Emmanuel. He is there with us, even in the most difficult and worst circumstances. And look, I know where this can go. I mean, I was a kid who was abused when I was young. And so to ask that question seems pretty scary. But I want you to know that in the worst of circumstances, God does not abandon. God does not betray. God wants good for his people. He desires good for us. So, to forgive a betrayer is a big thing. You know, there's these things like, well, that's not the way a neighbor is supposed to act. And they do something to you that's not neighborly. That's not the way a brother or sister is to act. And they do something that feels like betrayal. That's not the way a husband or wife is to act. There's betrayal. And so to forgive is tough. And what you have to do is there is a putting trust in God and not in the circumstances or the people. And I'll come back to that in a moment. I'll finish that thought. But let me finish the story here with Joseph. So, Joseph, the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, has some dreams, and he can't interpret them. He has 2 of them. None of his magicians or divination people, they can't figure out the dreams. And then it's then that the wine cupbearer goes, I remember a guy in prison, and Pharaoh, he did this. He told me my dream and the baker's dream, and here's what happened. And so Pharaoh's like, bring him to me. So Joseph gets cleaned up, brought before Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, I had some dreams. I heard you can tell dreams. And then Joseph's really clear. He says, hey, I can't do it, but God can. And then he hears the dreams, then he tells what they mean. And then here is the really amazing thing where you go, man, this Joseph guy, he is really a smart, sharp guy. Because after he tells the dream, he says, and here's what Pharaoh should do. He should find a man who could enact a plan that would save all the good that's made during the 7 years of plenty, and then have it for when the 7 years of famine come, then you'll have plenty in the time of need. And so Pharaoh's so impressed with Joseph at this moment. He's like, man, you're a sharp guy, and that's a great plan. I wouldn't have thought of that. Well, I'll put you'll be the man. I'll put you in charge of this. And he says to Joseph, today you are my right-hand man and second to me in command. And then the big switch happens. And so Joseph is in this position. And then, of course, the story continues. The 7 years of blessing, Joseph starts these storehouses in cities, and when the grain's brought in, there's a portion of it that's put in these storehouses, and then the famine hits, just like it was predicted in the dream. And then during the famine, of course, the famine goes wider than just Egypt. It goes all the way to the land of Israel, where Jacob is with his sons, and with his 10 sons, he says, hey, we need to get some grain for our families or we're going to die. So they send them to Egypt, and lo and behold, brothers, they come in before Joseph, bowing down humbly. They don't recognize Joseph, but Joseph recognizes them. And it's at that moment Joseph remembers his dream as a kid. And he goes, it's coming true. It's happened. And so there's this moment where Joseph knows God has been in this from the very beginning. God has been in this from the very beginning. And here it is, the dream unfolding right now in front of me. Now, Joseph, I know that there had to have been some forgiving and letting go leading up to this point, but Joseph shows some real emotion here. And when he sees his brothers, this emotion gets stirred up. I mean, here are the brothers that betrayed him, sold him into slavery, but yet he knows God is in this moment. He finds out some information from them, finds out his dad is still alive, all the other brothers alive, his youngest brother, Benjamin, is alive, and so but I think there's some anger there, because he says, there's a moment where they tell them, and then he says, you're lying. You're lying. And I don't know if that was just, he had a plan already. I wonder if there was a bit of anger because it was like, you lied about me for how many years to our dad? And you just told me, yeah, you didn't tell the story that, yeah, we sold our brother into slavery. You said, there's just one brother who's no more. And that's all our dad knows too. So there's this moment where he says, all right, you're all spies. You're telling a lie. You say that there's one brother out there left. I don't know if I believe that. This Benjamin, so I'm throwing you in prison. And he throws him in prison for 3 days. And that's where I think maybe Joseph has a moment to cool down, and he thinks of this plan. He thinks of this plan that he's going to test his brothers. And so calls the brothers back, and he says, well, because I fear God, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep one of you here in prison, and I'm going to send the rest of you home. And to get this brother out, you have to come back, and before you could ever get any more grain from us again, you have to come back with that youngest brother, Benjamin. Again, who was from the loved wife, Rachel, who was probably also the next in line for being the favorite. So you got to bring him back. And so it's interesting who he picks to stay behind. He picks Simeon, the second born, who didn't say anything when Joseph was in danger. I kind of wondered, did Simeon, was he the one kind of the instigator saying, let's kill him? And so Joseph is like, yeah, I'm going to put you in prison now. And you're going to get a taste of what this is like. So I don't know. That's all between the lines. Don't know. It's just theories. But anyway, so the brothers go home. And as they go home, there's silver. The silver that used to buy the grain is back in their sacks. Joseph has done this. And so then they're scared. And of course, when all this trouble was going down, they were talking amongst each other in Hebrew. And of course, Joseph was using an interpreter before. So they thought that Joseph couldn't understand them. But he was listening into their conversation. They were bickering among themselves. And one of the things they said was, you see, God is paying us back for what we did to our brother Joseph. And so Joseph gets to hear this. So he puts the money back in their sacks. They go back home. And back home, they tell their father. And their father's like, oh, my, yay. And we're in trouble. And anyway, they eat up all the grain. They got to send him back. They go back. And it's reluctantly because they got to take Benjamin. And they know that this is going to break their father's heart if he stays. And they go back. And when they go back, they say, okay, no, he's not in the palace. He's not in the administrative building. He's in his house. He wants you to meet him there. And the brother's like, oh no, He's going to do something to us while we're going to his house. He's going to attack us or kill us. And, because we got this silver and he's going to think we stole it. So they go in and we didn't steal the silver. It was found in our sacks. And Joseph's like, hey, cool. I got what I was paid. The money's all taken care of. You don't have to worry about. God must have done something special for you. And so he has them to dinner. And they sit down, and he puts them in order around the table, in the birth order. And that kind of freaks him out. It's like, how did he know that? And then as they're sitting around the table, Benjamin is there. And of course, he also brings Simeon out of prison, and so they're all there. And he gives Benjamin 5 times more food than anybody else. And they're kind of like, what's going on here? And so he sends them on their way with more grain, and they brought money to pay for the next round, and so anyway, they head home, and as they're going home, Joseph has a part of his plan, has put his special silver cup that he drinks with at his table, puts it in the sack, in Benjamin's sack of grain. And so Joseph sends his guards out after the brothers, and the guards say, hey, how could you do this? How could you were invited into his home and you stole from his special drinking cup. And they're like, we didn't do it. Hey, if anybody did it, you can have them as a slave for the rest of your life. I don't know why they mentioned something like that. I wouldn't volunteer any kind of punishment if I got caught for something. But anyway, so they volunteer this idea of punishment, and then not realizing that Benjamin has this cup. And of course, when it's discovered, they're like, oh, rip our clothes, mourn, cry. This can't happen. This will break our dad's heart. And so they go back to Joseph's house. They all go back together, and they're weeping and they're crying. They're saying, we can't do this. Benjamin can't stay here. If he does, it'll kill our dad. And Judah steps up and says, hey, look, I will take his place. I will take his place. Let Benjamin go. And it's at this point that Joseph goes, they're different. They've changed. They're not the same brothers that I know. They're sorrowful over what has happened. They're willing to take punishment that was supposed to go on somebody else. And so at that point, Joseph reveals himself to his brothers and he says this, look, it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. It was not you who sent me here, but God. Don't be angry with yourselves. And so he reveals, and then of course the story winds up, and Jacob comes, all the family comes down. They live in the care of Pharaoh and Joseph, and happy ending. So, but here's the story. When Joseph sees that his brothers are changed, Joseph reveals and he says these amazing words of forgiveness in light of a God who had arranged all this big plan. And what I want to say in forgiveness is here is the big deal. And that's why I've been carrying these little changes to remind me this biggest part of forgiveness. So Annie, come up here. Help me out. So let's say that Annie does something that offends me and hurts me. And so she throws this sin chain at me. And it's a sin against me. I hang on to it. And so there's this moment where I can let go of this. I can forgive. But there's a part of me that goes, you know what? I'm not going to forgive her because I'm angry. And this is not right. It's not what should have happened. This is wrong. And so I'm going to punish Annie. And the way I'm going to punish her is I'm not going to forgive her. And we get this thing of we feel like we're punishing them by not giving them the thing that would make them feel better. And so we hold on to it. And so what we find is when we hang on to this and we don't forgive, that they just kind of come around with us everywhere we go. And I might be, Annie may not be really here with me, but I go and I'm talking with Bree and we're talking and I'm like, oh, no, I would never do that. I would never, because I don't ever want to be like Annie. No, I would never do that. And all of a sudden there's this, ooh, and Bree and Maddie go, ooh, there's some little bitterness there in Shannon. What's going on with him? He's kind of carrying something with him. Yeah, I'm carrying Annie around with me everywhere I go. I'm carrying this because I'm attached. And that's what sin does. It attaches us in this way. It's this spiritual bond. It's chains. And you can carry that around for a long time in your life. You know, and you think about maybe some of those people that hurt you when you're young, or people that were close to you that hurt you, and you feel like, no, I'm not going to let that go because I'm going to let them suffer for what they did to me. I'm not going to forgive them. But then really you're just punishing yourself by carrying this around with you all your life. And here's what we got to do. We just got to say, I forgive you. And I relinquish all my rights to punish you. That's really what we're doing when we say we forgive. I relinquish my rights to punish. Now, it's not maybe that trust is rebuilt automatically, but my trust is with God. My trust is that He's a just God, and if there's any kind of punishment that Annie needs or deserves, that He will take care of it, not me. It's not in my hands. I don't have that responsibility. So I can let go of that. And then when I say I forgive, guess what? She can drop the chain too. And she's released. Thank you, Annie. So that's the wonder of a little thing called forgiveness. That it's a 2-degree trajectory change, but it's just a 2-degree difference, but it makes this huge trajectory change in your life. And I believe with Joseph, he was able to let go of bitterness and anger, hatred, and say, God, look, I can't punish. I can't mete out justice. I trust you to take care of that. So I forgive. I let it go. I let it go. Now, of course, he had the moment where he actually faced those who hurt him. And, was there anger there? I don't know. But there was that moment where 3 days he threw him in prison. I kind of wonder if he was working through some of the emotions. But I know that God, what Sherry said earlier, God wouldn't raise up a leader into that kind of position where he would just be a bitter, angry person and would just inflict more pain and hurt on others. God was refining Joseph. Again, some of Zach's words right at the beginning. God was refining and doing some things with Joseph where he was at the right place at the right time. And the trajectory of his life was moving towards life and not death. Because when we hang on to that bitterness and unforgiveness, that's a path leading towards death, not life. And of course, the big story with all of this is that Jesus is our Joseph. He's not at the right hand of Pharaoh, but he is at the right hand of God. And that he offers forgiveness to us, the brothers and sisters who have betrayed him. And he offers it freely. And with that, our lives are changed. You see, the big story was God was preserving the Abraham family, the promise family, the God promise family, so that they wouldn't die and the promise could continue. And so they had to have grain to live, to survive the famine. That was the big story of God bringing Joseph to his place. That was the big picture. But did he do some amazing things in Joseph's life? Yeah. Did he do some amazing things for them? Yes. Rescued them, saved their lives. And that's the kind of forgiveness that we receive from Jesus that changes the trajectory of our spiritual destiny. Changes from one going to death to life. That forgiveness that leads from death to life. That's what Jesus offered to us. You know, when you think about it, Jesus had to walk through some of those steps too, although he had not sinned in any way. But he had to know that God was with him in the worst of circumstances as he went towards the cross, towards Jerusalem. You know, he didn't pour out bitterness or anger towards God because of what God was directing him and the path he had to take towards the cross. Bitterness and anger towards God is just misdirected. It's fruitless. And Jesus demonstrated a trust in God when he was going towards the cross. Jesus used his gifts regardless of the outcome and the way people treated him. He used his gifts to heal people, and some of those healed people got up and followed him. Some of those healed people didn't. He fed the 4,000 and 5,000, and some of them said, "Yeah, you are the Messiah. I believe in you." And others were like, "When's the next meal?" He used his gifts regardless. And people do betray, and Jesus was betrayed. But he was able to forgive. And in fact, when he was on the cross, what did he say as he was being crucified? "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." Wow. Forgiveness that leads to life. Jesus was offering it. And then, of course, that forgiveness can lead to the restoration of relationships. Restoration that leads to long-term friendships and joy. Again, we see Joseph's family reunited, living in joy, goodness, and plenty. And Jesus has reunited us with the Father, with his family, so that we can live forever, eternally, with joy and plenty. So, that's the story. And I tell it to you so that we could be free people, free from bitterness, free from the chains of unforgiveness, that we could be free from believing lies that maybe we've heard spoke to us when we had hard things happen to us, lies that were spoken to us when we were hurting. I tell you this story so that maybe you could allow God to reframe your past, and you could see that God was there all along, helping you, guiding you. And I tell you this story so that you could be free to use your gifts and not worry about the outcome, and free to start a new trajectory in life, that you have the ability to do that in offering forgiveness to those who hurt you.